Hey, greetings everyone. It's GleeCon here again with another episode of Lore of Warcraft. Stay a while and listen to this one. It's called The Fall of Apexis. We've now jumped forward, I want to say around 800 years. This is now 1,200 years before the Dark Portal, where we left off. The last one, the Breath of Rukmar, the Apexis Light faction, the Akali, something like that. They used their light power to create this giant solar flare and basically defeated the primals to such a degree that they'll never rise again. Plant life will never be the dominant form again, and it'll never be anything more than just a few straggling races. Nothing for them to ever really worry about. So as you see it now, in Warlords of Draenor, certainly, and even maybe more so devolved in Burning Crusade. So the process of doing that did lead to most of the Arakoa being destroyed. About 3/4 of them are gone. Most of the dark Skalax, something like that, most of them are gone. And it's just a small faction of the light ones that are left. Maybe some of the Anzu following ones are left too, but half were already destroyed, and then all the shadow ones. So a good chunk, 3/4, 2/3 to 3/4 of them are gone. Let's find out what happens to lead to their eventual complete fall. All right, centuries after defeating the resurgent Evergrowth, the Apexis had flourished into an empire. Okay. And their population swelled. The high-minded Arakoa saw themselves as the most powerful force in the world, a force that not even the mightiest of the primals had been able to contend with. Yeah, that would make you feel good. You defeated a spore mound. With nothing to threaten their existence, the Apexis devoted themselves to the advancement of science and magic. Knowledge became the most coveted resource in their culture. The Anhar and the Skalax, there you go, orders became the caretakers of wisdom. It was their duty to catalog history, the study of magic, and information about the world and its various creatures. Rather than keeping this knowledge in tomes or scrolls, the Apexis developed something else. Anari priests and Skalaxi sorcerers combined their magics to create crystalline storage devices. There you go. That's what you have on the Apexis ledge up there in the Blade Spire Mountains. By merely touching one of these crystals, an Arakoa could consume all of the knowledge stored within it. They could even experience the memories of whoever had crafted the device. The Apexis applied their magics to the creation of mechanical constructs that could do their bidding. The Arakoa had always been arrogant, and they became even more so after their victory. They deemed those who walked the world's surface to be unclean. The Apexis used their constructs to mine metals from the earth and gather resources from the ground. I wonder if that's my dog you hear in the background. He had a operation this morning, and he's not a happy camper. So I wonder if when you see all these like fell machinery walking around in the Burning Crusade, I wonder if it's the remnants of the Apexis here. Religion also defined the Apexis in their daily lives. The Anari priests constructed a gleaming sun temple around the mechanism they had used to annihilate Tala. Hundreds of Arakoa gathered at the site each year to commemorate the Apexis victory and honor Rukmar. I wonder if that's what Ashendun is going to become, or if this is the place where you find the Sun King, because he's got like a phoenix flying around him in the beginning of that raid. Other Arakoa visited shrines carved into the solid rock near the foot of the spire. There, Skalaxi sorcerers perform rituals to honor the raven god Anzu and his ancient sacrifice. The Apexis culture seemed destined to continue its rise, but such was not the case. A bitter rivalry developed between the Anhar and the Skalax orders as each vied for the support of the greater populace. The Anari knew that to seize power over their race, they would need to control knowledge. The order's leader, Priest Lord Velthreek, told his followers to gather as many of the Apexis crystals as they could. Over a number of years, the Anari did so in secret. They hoarded the crystals and stored them within their sun temple atop the spire. The Skalaxi and their leader, Sorcerer Lord Salavas, eventually uncovered what was happening. They believed that knowledge was a basic right for all Arakoa, and that it should be available to every member of their race. Salavas called for the immediate release of the crystals from the Sun Temple. Again, you have the dark side there, with a seemingly more noble agenda. Velthric ignored the demand. He declared the Inari the sole rulers of the Apexis. The Order would decide who could access the crystals and their knowledge. In addition, Velthric claimed that he and the Inari were the living representations of Rukmar herself. Therefore, following the Order's teachings was the only way the Arakoa could attain the Sun Goddess's favor. Oh yeah, so now we're trying to create a complete, racial caste system. Salavas was a cunning Arakoa, and he foresaw what would happen to his order if they did not act. The Skalaxi would become marginalized in society, and they would gradually lose influence. The Sorcerer Lord gathered his followers and struck at the Sun Temple. If the Inari would not share the Apexis crystals, the Skalaxi would take them by force. At the gates of the Sun Temple, a terrible battle erupted between the two orders. It quickly spilled into the lower levels of the spire. Some Arakoa sided with the Inari, others with the Skalaxi. For many months, a civil war engulfed every corner of Apexis civilization. To turn the tide of the conflict, the Inari harnessed the breath of Rukmar. They ignited the colossal weapon and prepared to incinerate the Skalaxi and their followers. So they're going to turn their weapon on their own people. Against the breath of Rukmar, Salavas knew that the Skalaxi were doomed, yet he would not give in. He led a handful of his most gifted sorcerers to the top of the spire. They stormed through the Inari guardians and reached the breath of Rukmar itself. As the Inari cut down the intruders, Salavas wove a spell to destabilize the breath of Rukmar. It worked, but the result was catastrophic. A furious explosion erupted from the mechanism, instantly killing most of the Arakoa on the spire and shattering the land. After the light of the blast dimmed, all was dark. The explosion had split Arak's single spire into numerous smaller stone towers. The surrounding region was left a barren wasteland. In time it became known as the Spires of Arak. It would take generations for life to bloom in the area again, and even longer for the surviving Arakoa to recover from what had happened. The Apexis society was no more, but from its ashes, new cultures would arise. The rebirth of Rukmar, sidebar. During the height of the Apexis culture, a small group of Inari priests sought out the remains of Rukmar. They found her charred bones near the spire, and they used their magics to resurrect the great bird. The Inari succeeded, but only partially. This new Rukmar had but a sliver of the original deity's power and intelligence. Nonetheless, the Apexis worshipped her as the goddess reborn. The Inari infused her with their light powers, granting the firebird a long life so she could soar the skies for millennia. Wow. Okay, so a lot going on in this one. We have Arakoa society that's essentially been divided into a shadow and a light side. All of these Arakoa are worshippers of Rukmar, which was the ultimate original light being. The shadow ones dealt with arcane magic as well. So it's hard to say, but they also honor the raven god Anzu. So it seems like the shadowy side was more the neutral and evil, and yet they wanted the power to go to the people, the power of the Apexis crystals. And the smartest, the highest level ones wanted all the smarts for themselves, these Inari. So yeah, it broke out and a civil war happened. And it was all around that breath of Rukmar, the same thing that allowed them to become the dominant race on the planet. They turned this superpower, this nuclear bomb level technology, on themselves. They fought over it, and it exploded. It ripped the single spire of Arak into the region known as the Spires of Arak, which is where it is in Warlords of Draenor. We still don't see it. Actually, I think in Burning Crusade, that region is completely gone. It's not even there. So I am definitely curious of how the map of Burning Crusade compares to the map of Warlords in Draenor and what's official history, because there's that element of Warlords of Draenor where it's like, this is time travel, or this is, there's that element to it. We also have this happening here at the end where this one sect worships the bones of Rookmar. So I'm curious to see, I don't remember enough, but I wonder how many in-game things draw on this. And when we go through our Let's Plays, it's not going to probably be until the World of Warcraft level where we get to see a lot of this stuff, but maybe we'll get some callbacks where we can be like, oh, yeah, I remember when we read that. Okay, and importantly, to end it all at the back, we have a map of Ancient Draenor. This map of Ancient Draenor is, in large part, the same one that you see in Warlords of Draenor. So let's look and see what we have here, just because it's curious. We'll talk about the ways that they have changed as well. So we have, in Burning Crusade, first of all, keep in mind, you're not on a Pangea-type continent with an ocean. It's, for whatever reason, there is no sea. This is lifted up and floating in space. So one, we have to figure out why the heck that happens in Burning Crusade. We have the Tanaan Jungle, which we know becomes the Hellfire Peninsula. This is fought, the edges of it are the Breakers. They control the mountains, with this region right here to the north being one of the high areas that require flight to get to. So you could make the argument that maybe that was one of the Apexis observation posts. However, the Legion has that. Ashran is no more, but it's a tiny little island thing, so it could possibly have migrated up this way, depending on how you see the map. Because up here where Farallon is, which is pure run by primals, and Ashran is purely run by the Breakers. Over here is the Netherstorm, and the Netherstorm is sort of broken off into these island regions. So you could make the argument possibly even that part of Gorgrond and these are sort of making up the Netherstorm, which is a series of floating islands. Frostfire Ridge is the Bladespire Mountains. Icy Red, it's all of this, most of Gorgrond and all of Frostfire Ridge is Breakerland. So it seems like the Horde, which makes sense as well, because the Breakers is the Orc homelands. So this is Horde land / Orc land, Breakerland. The snow melts. That's one thing we see, and this just becomes straight, jagged mountains. Obviously, this just becomes totally ravaged by magic and stuff out here, with like a barren wasteland, especially if you include those. This is also, this jungle, the Tanaan Jungle, is just totally bad land. So, just jacked. The Zangar Sea is drowned and becomes the Zangar Marsh. That's no one's land for now. The borders around Nagrand, these are, also up here we have another Apexis watching post. As a matter of fact, this border is key Apexis territory. For whatever reason, this is Ograla up here where all of the Apexis crystals, so I don't know why it gets located there if their kingdom was down here, but that's all Apexis crystals up there. I think there's some flight points here too. Okay, as we get into Nagrand over here, this Nagrand, it stays Nagrand. It's one of the only things that doesn't have a name change. But it's also, the height of the goodness where the Breakers fell. It's ruled by primals throughout the center. The edges are the mountains. I think this chunk might be fallen off, maybe in Burning Crusade. If not, whoops. If not, you don't ever go there really. But Nagrand pretty much stays as is. Talador is the Terrakar forest and where Shatrath City is. And that's mostly primal territory. It's a forest. That's the one that seems to have undergone the most changes. Shadowmoon Valley stays Shadowmoon Valley. This is the only one, Nagrand and Shadowmoon Valley, that don't have a change. This is mostly primal land. And we know that's the Alliance base. That's where they start. And finally, this is an interesting chunk because This is Apexis territory, Arak. This is there in Warlords of Draenor. It's called the Spires of Arak. So it's already broken from one giant mountain peak into a bunch of little mountains. But most importantly, Burning Crusade, this is not there at all. This whole jutting southern part of land, for the most part, is gone. There might be a pinch right here, because, like I said, you have Ocean Dune somewhere in this area. Yeah, there's a story to be told there for sure. Okay, I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that this book will give us a lot of those answers. Thank you for bearing with me. Another episode in the pipes, 5x5, and I will see you guys on the next episode of Lore of Warcraft.